Hi, my name is Adam Ashley. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I am the co-founder and co-president of the Greater Good Initiative.
My name is Elliot Smith. I am a national social justice organizer for Repairers of the Breach. And then I'm also the national organizer for the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival.
My name is Tarina Ahuja. I take the She series, She, Her, Hers, and I'm affiliated as the co-founder and president of the Greater Good Initiative, which is a youth-led, youth-run policy think tank.
Just racial injustice, and I know that a lot of that has in their administration, at least in their campaign promises, has been policing reform, and I think that that's obviously an extremely pressing issue. And then another thing that I personally am very passionate about is like infrastructure. Other than that, I'd say also climate change.
Part of what the Poor People's Campaign and part of what we're doing, we unveiled 14 policy priorities. Part of that includes guarantee quality healthcare for all, quality housing. We also want to see cancellation of student debt. We also want to see the protect and expand voting rights, fight for $15 an hour minimum wage and increase to that.
For me personally, I'm the daughter of immigrants. You know, the intersectional identities of so many of us in America call for policy change that is equitable, that's inclusive, and that is centered in basic empathy and human rights. So I think for me, immigration reform is a huge one that I've been focusing on, as well as just making sure that civil rights are at the forefront of President Biden's agenda in a lot of the policy that he's working with. I think that if we're thinking about the promises he made and he's keeping, I think that Biden is continuing to try to expand Obamacare. For me personally, I think that a lot of my own individual views would kind of want healthcare expansion to go much further than Obamacare did.
It is not just, not only affordable healthcare, it's really expanding it to universal healthcare, single payer. We really need to see him push members of Congress. We really need to see him push the Senate. And that's something where we all have to come together and organize around.
I think that it's just going to be in the next year, but also in the next 4 years, a continued push and pull between people on the ground, citizens, and the administration to see how far we'll go, but also what's going to be included when and how is it going to be rolled out. Biden says time and time again that racism is institutional. He acknowledges that it's systemic, but I think my biggest question, along with so many young people, is where is the institutional change?
Especially on the topic of minimum mandatories, which is something that I'm fairly passionate about. I think sort of what we've seen is him really laying out exactly what his platform is in terms of like racial justice, which obviously spans such a wide variety of things. Obviously, I know he mentioned like access to jobs, as well as just improving social welfare programs, and then talking about jails, and now talking about mandatory minimums. I think it's very exciting. I am optimistic, but to a certain extent, that all of this will get done in the next 4 years, just because it is, stating a lot. And I think that's something that we definitely have to consider.
Everything's interconnected. If you don't address climate change and how natural disasters have affected poor and low-income communities, disproportionately Black and brown. You don't address the increase in the minimum wage, voting rights issues. It's all interconnected when we see racism today. Part of it, is bigger and broader than just police brutality, as grotesque as we've seen it be. And so part of what we have to do is we have to continue to hold the administration accountable, not only with the words that they say, but what are they going to do in terms of the policy?
President Biden, obviously, we all seen his past and know what he's done when he was in the U.S. Congress, and the way that his actions have done so much to contribute to systems of racism. He talks about different reforms, like thinking about mandatory minimums, thinking about cash bail, marijuana legalization, updating the Voting Rights Act, and so much more that he promised and continues to say he will deliver on. And bills in Congress right now, some of which align with the updating the Voting Rights Act. So we've seen some progress on that. But when looking at criminal justice reform, there's still so much that has been promised that hasn't been done or touched. And I think that that's something that we really, really have to continue pressing Biden on, because we saw the very day of the Chauvin trial, a 16-year-old girl was murdered by the police. It's more and more obvious it can't be a moderate reform. It has to be a radical reform, and rebuilding of these institutions that allow the carceral state to continue villainizing youth of color, specifically Black youth and Black folks across the country. And so I think that there are some promises that he didn't even make in the first place. We've seen a lot in terms of policing where he's thinking about funding the police more, but I think it's becoming more and more obvious that we need to start pressuring him more and more to defund the police as we look for alternatives, mental health alternatives, community alternatives, and investing in communities instead of policing them.
One of the things that we need to do, that we have done within the campaign, within the Poor People's Campaign, is that we analyze racism not by words, but by policy. I think, as young folks, as movements, we just have to connect everything together. And in this case, I think President Biden has this bully pulpit, and he has to use it, and he has to really be resolute, because as a nation, we voted for change. And so it's more than words, it's what you're gonna do about policy.
Are we going to see long-term all of the outcomes he promises? I don't know if we can say for sure, but we do know that, I guess you could say he's impotized, or, he's catalyzed almost by these actions of misjustice, or injustice rather, to actually create change for good, which I think is really, really admirable and exciting.
We just have to continue to push him and Congress and the Senate to really implement these policies to address systemic racism in all of its form.
Well, obviously, Biden does have a commitment to the Second Amendment, and I personally do not think that that is a bad thing. And I think that Biden's plan obviously does fall very moderately. It somehow receives backlash significantly from both sides as a result. I think that he obviously has a plan. It just might not be the most, it's not appearing to be the most well received. So that might be something that we keep an eye on during the administration to see if it changes in any way, just because obviously that was a point of contention for a lot of people.
Earlier in April, President Biden put out proposals on gun control, things like community intervention, background checks, the things that we hear time and time again. And I do appreciate those proposals and those efforts, but I think that something that I'm looking for is there to be a larger understanding and depth of specific, hate crimes. And I just am really looking for President Biden to be the one to champion this and move the needle, because the frank reality is that in the US, gun violence is a problem uncompared to countries around the world. And if we don't take actual action now by taking what might be a political risk, nothing is going to happen on it.